Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Supplier U. This is Matt Pfeiffer, and we are joined today by our friend Mike Graen, one of the industry's absolute authorities on-shelf availability. And Mike has hosted a series with us over the course of, I think better than a year now, looking at the various aspects of on-shelf availability, everything from shelf scanning robots, algorithms, et cetera. In fact, we've got another conversation coming up in the next few days. But Mike has been very generous with his time and very gracious, and teaching this class for us today on the fundamentals of on-shelf availability. So many of his conversations have been very strategic, but looking at individual tactics. They've been great conversations. We've learned an awful lot. But Mike is going to back things off a little bit and kind of look at on-shelf availability from 40,000 feet. So glad you're here. And thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Matt. Really do appreciate it, and appreciate people tuning in to listen to a little bit of a topic that's, I think, very, very important to a lot of people, but really kind of misunderstood by a lot of people. So we're gonna start at a strategic level and talk a little bit about what it is and how you measure it, and if things are not going the way it should be, what are the possible things that you can do about it. So a couple things just as a background. I have been in the industry for about 40 years. I started with Procter Gamble in the early 80s. My role was primarily joining the company in Cincinnati, where the P&G company is headquartered, then moved my family to Northwest Arkansas in 1989 as part of the Procter Gamble and Walmart team that was formed here, basically at the request of Sam Walton. Was really the IT and supply chain person, more of the IT side, but a lot of it was a supply chain. Started out with the very early days of, hooking up email systems. As crazy as that sound, we couldn't, email Walmart from a P&G's perspective when we first started working with them. Got involved with transitioning from that to mechanizing the purchase orders and invoices. Believe it or not, when we first started working together, all of our purchase orders and invoices were on fax machines, and transitioned that into an electronic format. Got very actively involved with Walmart on the data sharing, and actually spent about 6 months inside of Walmart on a project team, which ended up becoming the Retail Link platform. So I've been very actively involved with that. And then in 2003 or so, got involved with Procter Gamble and Walmart with a piece of technology called radio frequency identification. And I did that until about 2015, when I decided to leave P&G and join Walmart, and I led their RFID effort for a while. Also was involved with a lot of the third-party merchandiser solutions with Anderson and Acosta and Advantage. And really developed and delivered a product to them called the Spark program. And that was in the early, I guess that was, probably the 2014-15 timeframe, which has now been converted into a package called Volt that was just acquired by Walmart from Premium Retail. So really had a lot of great opportunity. And then I spent a couple of years with CROSSMARK working on that. So I've had the benefit of seeing this business, but the retail supply chain, from a supplier perspective with Procter & Gamble, from a retailer perspective from Walmart, and then a third-party service provider with CROSSMARK. And it's been, I wouldn't change a thing, because it's given me an opportunity to sit in all three chairs and see what some of the opportunities are. So I now have a company called Collaboration LLC. I've just completed a project with Walmart, actually a multi-year project with Walmart, which was rolling out RFID for apparel and automotive tires and electronics. We'll probably touch on that here in a few minutes. But it's been interesting because everybody agrees on one thing, which is everybody wants to sell more product to customers, whether you're a supplier, whether you're Walmart, whether you're CROSSMARK or any of the other service providers. Everybody wants to be able to sell more product. And in order to do that, that product has to be available for them to purchase. So that's a little bit of background of me. Let me kind of move ahead. And I've got a couple quotes here, which I think are interesting. One was from Sam Walton, and, I will read this quickly. There is only one boss. It's the customer, and they can fire anybody in the company from the chairman on down simply by spending their money. So obviously Sam Walton was the founder of Walmart. And he recognized back then that, customers ultimately have choices. Well, it's become even more prevalent today with this thing called a device in your hand. You basically have the ability to acquire a product anywhere you want to. And I don't even know if people have seen this, but I've recently uncovered another quote from another very famous person at Walmart, who's the current CEO, which is Doug McMillon. And he said it a little bit differently, but it's the same thing. It's really simple. If you're not meeting the wants and needs of the customer, you're done. There's not a lot of loyalty there. In other words, they're going to get the products they want, whether it's from you or somebody else. So okay, those are really nice, kind of very important strategic kinds of comments, but why is that? How does that play out in actual retail? Well, really, when you look at retail out of stocks, and we've obviously come out of a very, very, very tumultuous situation with the global pandemic, with no paper towels and no Lysol on the shelf and, food at a premium, et cetera. We all realize what an impact that a retail out of stock has for people. But without even the global pandemic, we've got stats from IHL Group, things like, retailers are missing out $1 trillion in sales. I mean, that number just blows me away. But $1 trillion in sales because they don't have what customers want to buy in their stores. The second stat here is Amazon Prime members facing empty shelves are 52% more likely than other consumers to take out their phones and buy what they need online. And think about that. I am in a retail store. I'm looking for a product. They don't have it. I'm going to use that retailer's Wi-Fi to log on to one of their competitors and order the product. That's kind of ironic, but it does happen for sure. And the last one was really interesting to me is 24% of Amazon's current retail revenue comes from customers who tried to buy it in the store first. So faced with an out of stock, people have choices, just like Mr. Sam and Doug just mentioned. They will choose, I want the product, and I am not really having any loyalty to the particular retailer. So those are a couple of interesting stats. And there's a big difference here from my perspective between in stock, which people always talk about, and on-shelf availability, otherwise known as OSCA. It's actually on-shelf customer availability. In stock is a pretty straightforward measurement, which is, do you have an on hand in the product? Does your computer system say how many you have? Let's just say the number is 4. And is that number bigger than how many you think you'll sell that day? Let's say you're planning on selling 2. That's your forecast. So I have 4 and I think I'll sell 2. I'm in stock. Now, it has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that product is actually on the shelf for a customer. Could be sitting in the back room someplace. And that's the first thing. The second thing is, one thing we know about data, like on-hand accuracy and sales forecast, is they're wrong. A lot of times they're wrong. We'll get into that a little bit more later. But the real measurement we want to look at is this one, which is on-shelf customer availability, which is it available for the customer to purchase? Is it on the sales floor? Is it available on the side counter? Is it on a display? And that is a much more difficult thing to measure because I can't just use statistics to measure that for the most part. So how do we measure it? Well, the first thing is, it has to be there, whether it's in store, like you see the picture on the left of the customer shopping in store, but also you see on the right-hand side something called buy online or pick up in store. Walmart would call that OPD, but online picking or product delivery. But bottom line is that it's actual store associates or a third party like Instacart going in and shopping on behalf of a customer. Either way, they're buying the product off of the shelf, whether it's in a brick and mortar environment on the left-hand side or on the right-hand side. Whether somebody's buying it for you and either delivering it to your car or delivering it to your home or whatever. But bottom line is, if it's not on the shelf, you can't purchase it. So why is this important? Well, why it's important is because electronics and electronic commerce is starting to grow at a rapid pace. If you see on the right-hand side, and I just posted this on LinkedIn earlier this week, and I've gotten a number of different comments and reshares of this. But when you look at the total percentage of retail sales, 15.5% of the total retail sales is now done through some kind of e-commerce platform. That could be buying it online and picking it up in store. It could be buying it on, doing the research online and picking up in store, but any of those kind of that, or it could be just buying it from a retailer directly, like an Amazon, a pure play electronic platform like that, and having it delivered to you. So the 15.5% in and of itself is a pretty big number, but when you start looking at things like computers, over 53% are done online. When you look at apparel, 37%, almost 38% of the purchases are done online. Those are enormous numbers. And so they're obviously growing as well. Even though food and beverage is 4.8%, I'll guarantee you, because of online pickup and delivery and grocery services and Instacarts, et cetera, this data is back in 2021. I'll guarantee that number is a lot bigger now. So that's a huge impact. The other one is you just look at a specific category. This happens to be just the electronics business. There's a retailer out there that literally has gone from $6.6 billion back in call it 2010 to almost 41.26. Not a big surprise who that is. That is Amazon. So it is making a play, and all these other retailers, even though they may be growing, are not growing nearly as fast as the people who are doing this on an e-commerce platform. So what does all that mean? Why is that? Okay, let's dial it all the way back to a specific retail store. And, we look at this example here, and we got an example which looks like, kind of head and shoulders in a store. This happens to be a Walmart store, but it could be any store. And we see a pretty obvious, issue with one of these, which is that red box right there is an out of stock, right? That is clearly, I have a label, I have no product, and therefore I am not on the shelf. So if I am looking for that product, I'm going to either have to choose a different product because it's not there, or I have to go and potentially choose a different retailer, pull out my phone and I say, well, I'm going to order from somebody else then. That's what most people see, but there's a lot more going on here with this shelf. The rest of it looks pretty good. These yellow boxes are called distribution voids. So that's what a CPG supplier would call them. A distribution void, or a missing label, is what a retailer would call it, which is, hey, the label's not there. Not only is the label not there, but the product's not there. So not only missing the product, but I'm missing the label as well. And obviously that's just as much of an on-shelf availability issue as the out of stock. It's not as obvious. But if I go and I'm trying to find that product and the label's missing and the product's missing, obviously I have to make another choice. Number two is when somebody comes out to actually stock that product. So I've finally got a shipment from the distribution center and I bring it out and I try and stock it. There's no place for it to go. The only place for it to go is back in the back room. All right. And again, last time I checked, we don't sell a lot of shampoo out of the back room. We sell it off the side counter like we have here. So that missing labels is obviously one. Pricing, it is an on-shelf availability issue. The product may be there, but the price may be not correct. So the price at the register and the price on the shelf could be different. Down stocking, that's typically that top shelf there is not shoppable. You even see a message there that says, please get to ask for help of things on the top shelf. But that is extra inventory that's up there. And if it's up there, it's probably not really shoppable by a customer. And then last but not least, this is one of my favorites, is something called a plugged item or an incorrect item. That's where you have a label, you have product, but the label and the product don't match. Okay. So it says, making it up, blueberry scented shampoo and conditioner, and it's supposed to be strawberry scented or whatever. I know that's kind of a weird example, but anyway, you see on this picture, there's a lot more going on than is that one out of stock. Okay. Each one of these is an on-shelf availability issue. And now multiply that times the several 100,000 items that happen to be in a Walmart store and the several hundred, probably 4,600, 5,000 different Walmart stores that are out there. That's the number of combination of items that could be wrong. And we're talking about Walmart because we all live in at least I live in Northwest Arkansas, but this is true for any retailer, right? Whether it's Target or Kroger or Albertsons or anything like that. So All right. Well, that's a little bit interesting. It's also a little overwhelming. But first is, well, how are you even going to measure this stuff? What are the mechanisms and techniques? Because at this point in time, I don't know how I go into a store and find all this. Well, there's a bunch of different ways, and I'll cover these briefly. But there's several different ways to try and measure whether the product is on shelf availability or not. The first is with an algorithm, and I'll walk you through an example of that later. Companies like Team Core and Retail Insights, and I'm not sponsoring their stuff, but they do have algorithms that take data. And if I'm normally selling 12 or 14 or 17 a day, and all of a sudden I go to 0, that is algorithmically outside of the normal, what we would expect. And we would then call that a potential on-shelf availability issue. So that's one way that some retailers and suppliers measure on-shelf availability. The second one is store audits. This one happens to be by a company called Field Agent, but Field Agent Tracks, they all provide these kind of services where they will literally allow a individual to come in, take a picture of a shelf, quickly analyze, is it on the shelf or not on the shelf, and potentially do research and provide that to a third-party merchandiser to actually go in and fix the out-of-stock or on-shelf availability issue. Third one, and we've done several of these on our podcasts, and I think this is very well represented as well. What's coming much more obvious is robotics in stores, store robotics. So this is an example of a robot called the Badger robot. It is a shelf scanning robot. It basically goes up and down the aisle and it turns on a light and it basically scans the sales floor for exactly what I just shared. Missing products, out of stocks, missing labels, incorrect pricing, plugged items, etc. And it provides a very clear list of those for either a retailer and or a third-party service provider to go out and fix. The next one is interesting. These apparel items are harder to count. I can't just take a picture of them because they all look the same. I can't necessarily actually look at an algorithm because for a specific size color combination, it's very difficult to be able to say, I'm selling 3 or 4 or 5 a day. I'm probably selling more like 3 or 4 or 5 a month. And so I can't tell algorithmically that I don't have the product. So another piece of technology that comes into play is this thing called radio frequency identification. We'll talk more about that later, but it basically is a small tag which is actually on the garment like the one you see, and then you use an RFID reader, just like if you went to a toll road with your car and you had a tag in your car and you drive through and it says, thank you very much. That is the exact same kind of technology, except a lot of retailers, especially in apparel and general merchandise, use this technology to correctly update their on-hands and make sure they have product on the sales floor. 2 more real quick examples that are that are starting to get traction. One is this idea of online shopping. And this one happens to be from a company called Instacart, although a retailer like Walmart does their own online shopping for customers. But as a customer orders a product, and this happens to be the employee of Instacart, they go through and actually pick all of the orders that the customer ordered. If they find it, they scan the item as they put it into the basket. You'll see her do it right there. She scans the item. I was able to correctly find that item. If I was not able to find that item, I will scan the shelf. Let's just say there's a label, there's a hole there. I scan the shelf, so there's no product there. I can scan the shelf, an empty shelf, and basically said that is what is called a nil pick. In other words, there is no product there for me. I may have to substitute for them. That nil pick information that's used by online shoppers can be very powerful to be able to lead into what are the on-shelf availability option or issues for the retailer. And then last but not least is fixed cameras. We're starting to see a lot more of that with company like InView on the right-hand side that has an OSA sensor. And this is SES and Magatag and Focal systems. Again, they've got camera or sensor technologies that tell you if you're on shelf or not. And again, anyway, all of this is available on the podcast that Matt was mentioning earlier. If you want to go deeper into any of these technologies, we have basically done podcasts on each one of those, so feel free to be able to do that. So if I can measure my on-shelf availability with these tools, what do I do about it? Well, first thing is, the key is being able to measure it with a fair degree of accuracy, and then setting a goal for what you want it to be. So here's a couple of examples where the actual OSA is 82.5, 75.5, 82.5, et cetera. The goal is to be on the shelf 95% of the time. Obviously, there's a gap. And with anything that's important in business, you want to be able to measure it and measure what your goal is. And if there's a gap, come up with action plans to close that. I'm going to walk you through a couple of examples of how people do that today. The first is, I mentioned to you, the algorithm approach. So you see these two items are selling in a store. They're selling 12, 15, 16, 12, 10, and all of a sudden both items go to zero. I can pretty much guarantee that item went from being on the shelf to not being on the shelf, okay? Because both of them went to zero at the same time. Very out of character versus the first 4 days. So the first thing you need to do is, okay, what am I going to do about that? Well, a lot of people will provide third-party coverage or retail reps. If it's a company that actually has their own retail sales force, they'll use their own folks. For those who don't, may use a third-party logistics or merchandise provider like an Acosta or Anderson or Advantage or Premium, et cetera. They will send those alerts directly to those individuals. They will go and find out and do the research. And in this case, they'll indicate, yes, it was a problem that wasn't on the shelf. I either fixed the ghost inventory problem, and we'll talk about ghost inventory in a little bit, or I printed a label, or I downstocked it, or I did something to get the product back on the shelf. And then what we do is we watch the actual sales following that intervention, and that is known as recovered sales. So with this with this OSA measurement, I can both measure how my OSA is. I can also measure the actions that I've taken and to measure the recovered sales that I got out of it. What are the major reasons why product are in the store? I'm going to way oversimplify this, but to me, there's three basic reasons why product is not on the shelf. And each one of them require a different lever or different tool to address. The first is on-hand accuracy. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but I want to kind of explain it a little bit more. So I've got a couple of examples here. I've got Wrangler jeans at Target. These particular items are Wrangler jeans. It's got a price of the product. It's got different ways that you can get it. Here's one, which is Wrangler jeans at Walmart. Okay. And we look at those two examples. This one's at Target and this one's at Walmart. And you start to say, well, what's the difference between them? Well, first off, it looks like, Walmart seems to have a little bit better selection. It looks like Walmart's is a little bit cheaper. It's $18.87. So certainly a little bit less expensive than Target at $19.99. But here's the big thing that people don't notice, which is this one here. Target offers this pick up tomorrow. And by the way, when I went and looked at this thing, it was late in the day. So it would have been probably available in 2 hours or so if I had to pick a normal day. And it says only 3 left. And then Walmart go back and say, the only thing I can do for there is I can do 2-day delivery. So they'll put it in the mail to me and I'll get it in 2 days. Well, what if I want it in a couple hours? Well, that really isn't an option today, right? So this is called buy online, pick up in store. And this allows you to be able to order them, have the store pick them, and then you come and pick them up. Well, why doesn't Walmart do that, but Target did? Well, this is actually before Walmart implemented a program to improve their on-hand accuracy. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means I'll give you several examples here, and this is pretty normal. I've got 4 different pairs of jeans, SKU 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each one of them have a store on hand, which is what does the computer system say I have? It has an actual on hand, which is what's actually in the store. It has what accuracy is that inventory, what's the status, and what's the reorder point. When it hits that number, like this number for all of these are 2, when it hits the number 2, that's when it reorders more product. Well, if we look at the first one, if on hand says I have 4 and I actually have 4, I'm 100% in stock. My on hand accuracy is 100%. If I go all the way down to the bottom one, the on hand says I have 3. I actually have 0. There's none in the store. May have never received them, may have gotten stolen, may have gotten misplaced, whatever. There's none physically in the store. So in that particular case, if I was to expose that on hand to say, yeah, we have 3 in the store, and then a customer orders them, guess what? I'm going to go and try and pick them, and we're going to be disappointed. In addition, I'm not going to sell any because I don't have any on the sales floor anywhere. And lastly, and this is the one that really gets you, we will never reorder that product because it says when the on hand gets down to 2, reorder the product. Well, the on hand is 3. The system's on hand. I actually have 0. In order for that 3 to go to 2, I have to sell one, but I don't have one to sell. So this last one here is never, ever going to be on the shelf until somebody makes an intervention. Retail accuracy is anywhere between 45 and 65%. That number floors people, but it's been studied over and over and over again in retail. In a retail environment where you've got customers and associates and third parties and all this other stuff, we don't see a very accurate inventory situation at retail. In addition, there's been studies that have shown if you can get your inventory accuracy, you're looking at anywhere between a 4 to 8% increase in sales. So, all right, well, that's fine. How am I going to get accurate? Well, the obvious answer is count it more often. But guess what? That hasn't proved successful in 35 years. I'm not sure it's going to be successful now. If there's a whole pallet or a rack of clothes there and 3 people go count it, I'll almost guarantee you all 3 will get different numbers. Okay? So counting is just difficult. It's laborious. You get interrupted. You figure out where you were, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of retailers are moving to RFID, and I'll walk you through an example of that here in a minute of how that works. But on-hand accuracy is absolutely one of the issues. The second one is the supply chain. Okay, we've heard a lot about the supply chain, certainly after the global pandemic. But here's an example of the supply chain. This is a actual example from a supplier that I just received the other week. And you see this dots on the bottom, the orange line on the bottom, that's the point of sale of their sales at a major retailer. Pretty flat, pretty predictable, a little bit of variation here and there, but for the most part, not a tremendous amount of variation. Now I look at the shipments of that same product to the retailer. You see up, down, up, down, up, down. You see all this variation, okay? And all the way back through the supply chain, you see that same variation. This is a concept known as the bullwhip effect. It's been out there forever. But basically, the farther you get away from the point of purchase, the more variability in the supply chain. Well, COVID did a number on us, which is we never expected the type of demand that we got for things like paper towels and cleaning products, et cetera. And so we saw empty shelves for a long time because there was a huge spike in demand, and the supply chain just could not keep up. It's now caught back up again, but it was certainly a very, very telling case for a lot of people. So the supply chain could be raw material, could be raw material manufacturing issues, could be labor shortages, could be transportation issues. We heard for a long time of all those vessels that were off the coast of California that we couldn't get unloaded. They were all sitting out there trying to be unloaded, and the issues that came from that. So all of these bad forecasts, labor shortages, transportation issues, et cetera, cause issues in the supply chain. And that's why Walmart and other retailers are starting to put in tighter and tighter working relationships with their suppliers to measure things like on time and in full. What percentage of the time did you ship my product on time and in full the way I expected? Because without product, retailers can't survive. The last thing I'll share with you is a collaboration with both Conversations in Retail and the University of Arkansas. And we've got a bunch of different podcasts out there, as Matt mentioned earlier. We would encourage you to go to Conversations on Retail and or the University of Arkansas website to see some of those. And these are some of the ones that are out there. So I told you I'd tell you a little bit of story about on-hand accuracy and RFID, and I'm going to kind of summarize with this one. But this was a technology that we used several times. We had a lot of starts and stops, but again, RFID in retail was used to really try and figure out. In 2003, there's an expectation by Walmart, and P&G and Walmart were working very closely with that suppliers would put RFID tags at the case and pallet level, and basically track these items as they went throughout the supply chain. So out of a manufacturer's facility, into a Walmart distribution center, out of a Walmart distribution center, into the back of the store, into the sales floor, and exiting the store. What we learned pretty quickly is a couple things. Number one is we already had pretty good systems at the case level to know where product was in the supply chain. It's when it became an item selling unit that it became much more difficult. The second thing is the technology just did not work very well, and it was very expensive. It was, 15, 20, 30 cents a tag. And it was very, very expensive. The tags have now come down significantly. They're now below kind of the 4 or 5 cent range, or about the 4 or 5 cent range. And the hardware and software that reads that and does something with it has become better and better and better. So we had a number of starts and stops when I was working at Walmart around RFID, both at Sam's Club, at Walmart. And we actually had it rolled out in 2010, this middle one here, Walmart rolls out to U.S. chain. So all U.S. stores were up and running on RFID for things like jeans, T-shirts, socks, underwear, automotive tires, moving in electronics, etc. And in 2013, there was a patent litigation across the entire industry that every single retailer and brand owner was basically at the jeopardy of potentially being sued. At that time, Walmart chose to not fight that, but hit pause on their efforts. They hit pause on their efforts, and we were removing all of the RFID activity from the business. A couple things happened. The first thing that happened is everything got disconnected, everything stopped. Retailers like Macy's and Target kept on going. They thought it was still the right thing to do. Lululemon, American stores, etc. All those stores continued, but a lot of the big retailers like Walmart and Sam's Club, etc., hit pause and said, "We're not going to go fight this thing." Fast forward to 2019, and I happened to run into a very, very smart merchant by the name of Deanna Baker. She was the senior vice president at merchandising at Walmart, and her and I were having a conversation about that first chart that I showed you that said more and more apparel is being done online, and more apparel is going to be using buy online and pick up in store. So exposing on-hand customers that says, I have 3 of these shirts, 2 of these pairs of jeans, etc., was going to be critical for her success as a apparel retailer. The problem still stood is on-hand accuracy was in the 40 to 65%. And so Deanna and I had a very long conversation about that. She said, well, how do I fix that? We talked about RFID, and she said, well, I thought it was too expensive and it didn't work. And there was this whole litigation. Kind of clarified that litigation had been solved, and those particular concerns were no longer there. And she fought for getting back into the RFID business. I happen to have a clip here from Diana that we'll have up on the podcast, but I think it's very important as a conversation. Again, she's now left Walmart, but she retired as a senior vice president of merchandising and apparel. But getting her take on the things that she had to do from a business champion standpoint to re-engage the company on something we had tried 3 or 4 times, I think is a pretty interesting case study. So let me play that video real quick. Well, I thought I had that video. Maybe I lied to you. Yeah, I guess I did. Sorry about that. I'll get that video to you, Matt, so you can integrate it into this talk. But following that, this particular situation, Deanna led this effort, redrove it, and now back in 2020, Walmart has now rolled out RFID for all of apparel. Not only have they included all of apparel, but they've actually expanded it beyond that to ask suppliers in toys, automotive, sporting goods, electronics, and home to tag. They are now up to 95% on-hand accuracy and can start leveraging this on-hand information and the accuracy that to be able to show to their customers. So that is a kind of a series of updates of what's going on. What's future? I think the future is going to be focusing on the supply chain. But if I'm a retailer and or I'm a CPG company, let me take you away with kind of what the so whats are. The first so what I think is really important, which is if it's important for you to measure and get traction on, there is a significant amount of importance on being able to measure it. Come up with a way of the 4 or 5 ways that I shared with you to figure out how to measure your on-shelf availability, number one. Number two, do something about it. And I use this as an example another day. If I just measure the on-shelf availability, I'm like a thermometer, okay? Thermometer just measures temperature, tells you what the temperature is. It doesn't do anything about it, doesn't adjust it. Our objective in this space is both measure and take action. So we want to be more like a thermostat than a thermometer, right? So I just don't want to measure it and say, yeah, I'm at 85% and I want to be 95%. I want to take action like the ones that I shared with you with the algorithm to send people in to get the product back on the shelf, to drive that distribution and get the product back on the shelf and see the recovered sales, which also improves your on-shelf availability. So from an action standpoint, if I'm a retailer, I need to measure it. I need to take action to improve it. If I'm a CPG, same thing. I want the same thing that the retailer was. I want my stuff on the sales floor so customers can buy it, or either online customers or brick and mortar customers. And bottom line is, if there's a value proposition there, if your company is thinking about trying to do that, be more than happy to work with Conversations on Retail and work with you to come up with a strategy based upon your category and the type of products you've got to be able to deliver the on-shelf availability that you're looking for. So Matt, that's kind of the overview on on-shelf availability. Lots of stuff out there, lots of different kind of business use cases, but the bottom line is, you get what you measure, and we all want to act. We all want to be thermostats and not thermometers. We don't want to just measure the situation. We want to measure it and take action and adjust it, and that really drive that on-shelf availability. And hopefully, this has been helpful for your audience to be able to see what some of those opportunities look like.
I think it's been tremendous, Mike, in terms of providing a kind of a historical perspective to give people an idea for what their options are, and then a call to action. I've got one question for you, and then I'm going to give you a little bit of kind of follow up to that one question. But are you optimistic about the future? And the reason I ask that is because there is a cynical view, perhaps, it would say, you know what, we've been after it for a really long time, and we're still wrestling with the same challenge. There's another cynical view that would say there's so much focus on the gadgetry, the technology, and all this stuff, but we're not really making any progress. And then somebody brought up what I thought was a really great point on one of your podcasts, which was, until the retailers really take ownership of it and create some standardization, we're not going to get where we need to get. So my question is, are you optimistic with all those sorts of cynical views in mind?
Well, I am optimistic because the technology and the process has never been better. I mean, we didn't have RFID 10 years ago. We didn't have shelf scanning robots 10 years ago. We probably had a very crude kind of algorithm. So the tools and the top processes are getting better. When I break it down, Matt, I break it down in 3 pieces. It's people, it's processes, and it's technology. I think the technology has gotten better. I think the people and the processes have not always been taken care of. That's like saying, I just subscribed. I want to get healthier. So I just invested in, and I'm now joined the world's best gym with every piece of fitness equipment that's out there that can take care of anything, but I never show up. It doesn't work, right? So number one, you have to have the business goals to be able to get on shelf. You have to be able to measure where you are. You have to set a goal, and you have to track progress against it. So am I optimistic? Yes, I am. For those who are not taking this serious, I hate to be doom and gloom, but I'm not sure you're going to be around and relevant in the future. I mean, being able to expose on hands and share those for customers for buy online and pick up in store are going to be jacks to enter. It's going to be like a UPC on a barcode on a product. If you don't have it, you're not going to be relevant, right? And so, and we've all seen what the history of retail. So, do I think that it's difficult? It's extremely difficult. It's not going to be easier, but there are better tools and better processes than ever. But you got to execute them. You got to measure them. And just like you have a sales goal or a customer goal, et cetera, it's a metric you have to measure. And if there's a gap versus what your goals are, you have to put processes in place to improve that. So, maybe my gym example is a bad one, but again, the tools are out there, the capabilities out there. The question is it important enough for you to know where you stand and be able to make, basically organization and people and process kind of decisions to take advantage of this stuff? I think it's really a question for the industry to wrestle with.
Yeah. Mike, we as an industry are so lucky to have a guy like you that has experienced so much and been around to not only see a lot, but to participate in it, and then to be at a stage in your career where you've got such a heart for giving back to the industry. And I know that's your sole motivation in the work you're doing with the university and in the help that you've given us is you really do want to see the industry do well, the next generation of leadership do well. And I say that to say that I hope the folks that are watching this will take advantage of a 5-minute conversation with Mike or an email exchange with Mike, because while he's probably busier than he wants to be right now, he really is super passionate about this and has a heart for developing people and teams and seeing the industry really begin to realize more and more of its potential. So, Mike, I could not be more grateful for the time you've invested in this and in so many other things with us. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate the opportunity and love being part of Conversations on Retail. Thank you very much.